Hello everybody, welcome back to another video, another Deltarune theory video to be exact. This is my fourth one, so, try and be lenient with me. Anyway, this one will be about attempting to understand the SPAMTON Sweepstakes 2, a recent update to the SPAMTON Sweepstakes website. If you don't know everything about the SPAMTON Sweepstakes 2, don't worry, because I'm going to surmise it all in this video. Now, as I usually do before all my videos, here's a small little disclaimer. Deltarune Chapter 3 and 4 are not out yet. If you're watching this after the fact, hello, I hope that you had a great time, and I am probably going to be really wrong. I am theorizing, nothing I say is 100% fact. There is a good chance that I am going to accidentally spread misinformation, and, feel free to call me out on that in the comments. I am kind of dumb. There is a good chance a lot of my theories are just going to be complete hogwash, so again, don't take everything I say with a giant pillar of salt. Now, like I said, the first part of this video is mainly going to be a summary of SPAMTON Sweepstakes 2, so if you're only looking for the theory stuff, feel free to skip ahead. I might leave a timestamp in the description, depends on future me. Anywho, this all started with the most recent Deltarune Newsletter, in which, alongside revealing the secret SPAMTON Sweepstakes and alternate ending that we didn't get because we voted for freedom instead of killing SPAMTON, Toby Fox released that. And he also encouraged everyone to go check the SPAMTON Sweepstakes website again, because, just for fun. However, we quickly realized that this was more than fun, because the website, the Noel Holiday blog website, which originally said there were 26 pages on the SPAMTON Sweepstakes, now says there's 40, meaning there are 14 brand new pages for us to go get our grubby little hands on. Now, the first of these pages could easily be found by clicking right under it on the button What's Next, which took you to deltarune.com/chapter3, which is just this blank page with the text not applicable. Now, obviously, this made people want to go and find deltarune.com/chapter1, which has a similar image. However, deltarune.com/chapter2 instead says applicable, weirdly enough. Now, alongside this, people also found out that if you held the left key while on deltarune.com/chapter3, the word but ... would come soaring in from the right side of the screen. Now, again, I am going to theorize on all this later, so try and keep this in your memory until I start doing all that, because this is going to be pretty important. Now, obviously, since we have Chapter 1, 2, and 3, people checked deltarune.com/chapter4, which is different, because you can see there's a small little red dot instead of it being applicable or not applicable. Now, clicking on that leads to deltarune.com/chapter4/message, which it only looks like this because I highlighted everything. Usually it's completely black, but with the button, which leads you to the same place. Now, how this, puzzle is meant to be solved is that the buttons on the bottom actually parallel with a computer keyboard, and that certain letters would lead to E.mp3 and others would lead to M.mp3. And the way to solve this quote-unquote puzzle was by putting all of the letters that led to M.mp3 and unscramble them out to spell thank you, which then leads to deltarune.com/chapter4/thank you. Now, funny little thing, if you go there as of me making this video, it won't actually have these three boxes, it will instead just be thank you, and I'll explain why in a second. So, going there, instead it leads to these three boxes. The first two you could type something in, and the third one, whenever you clicked it, if there was nothing in the two boxes, it would say unknown contact. Now, an interesting thing about this page is that the title for the past couple pages has just been ... while the title for this page is How Long Did It Take to Make Her Smile? Now, based off future information, and looking in the files, we know that the first box, you are supposed to type your email in. The second box, you're supposed to type your answer to the question, how long did it take to make her smile? And then the third box, you click it, it submits it, and then says thank you. Now, like I said, you can't do this now because they closed all submissions. And also, at around 9 p.m. the day of this happening, they sent out emails. Now, my email just contained a big black box because I, like a complete doofus, didn't put my answer to the question, I put my name in twice. Not my name, sorry, my email in twice. However, if I did put it in a submission, it would look something like this. It's saying that you answered, and then whatever amount of time you answered. Now, as of right now, there is really nothing new with this. I wouldn't be surprised if we, in the future, get some other email, but as of right now, that's really the end of Deltarune.com/Chapter 4's whole road. Now moving on to Deltarune.com/Chapter 5. Now the title for this one is just back. I don't really know what that's meant to mean, but the Deltarune.com/Chapter 5 leads to the image of a big 2, a small 4, and then a medium-sized 5. Now, actually, if you highlighted it, you can see that there actually exists a small 1 and a really big 3. Now, the number 1 is unclickable. The number 2, whenever you click on it, it would lead to D.MP3, aka D.OGG, aka the song that plays in the Snowgrave route, or Weird route as I prefer to call it, before you fight Birdly. Now, clicking on 3 would lead to MA.MP3, which is just a weird little sound effect. Now, if you don't mind, I'm going to break the immersion. Hey, look, it's my mouse. I'm going to click here. Yep, that's the weird sound effect. Clicking on number 4 just leads to Deltarune.com/Chapter 4, and then clicking on the number 5 leads to H.MP3, which seems to be a snippet of a new song, which you're going to hear right now. Oop. Yep. Yippee. Anyway. So, from that, that's really all there is with Deltarune.com/Chapter 5. You can't really go anywhere with that, except for Deltarune.com/Chapter 4, which I've already explained. Anyway, people also found that by going to Deltarune.com/RAM, which was the green room, which was in the original SPAMTON Sweepstakes, you could now click on this little stall area, which will lead to Deltarune.com/ROMB, which was just this image of these 2 doors. Now, darkly enough, the caption, or title for this was, "No one will shed a tear for him," which is, like, you know, weirdly kind of dark. Anyway, by clicking on these doors, it leads to just a black void. However, if you highlight, you can see that there's this black box just kind of moving all around the screen. Now, allegedly, if you click on this box, the title will change from "No one will shed a tear for him" to "You can never defeat us, let's rumble." Now, I haven't been able to replicate this because I've never actually been able to click on the box. It's kind of pathetic. Anyway, after waiting on that page for a bit, and instead transfers to the text, "If only you had the blank, your luck might have gone another way. No blank, no crystal." Now, if you click on these blanks, it actually plays the sound effect that played, that was on the Deltarune.com/Chapter 5 when you clicked on the number 3. Anyway, alongside old pages having new things, Deltarune.com/Egg, you can now click on the Secret Cats text, which led to Deltarune.com/Rain. Take a shot every saying I say Deltarune.com. Now this was just a story about Noelle's mother canceling school because it was raining too hard, so then Noelle invited Caddy over to play cat petters. Then she rants about a secret cat petters minigame that had secret cats in it. Now, she invites you to try it yourself, which leads to Deltarune.com/Rarecats. And in it, it's just a website where you click on cats, and every time you click on it, it summons another one. Now, from what it looks like, these chances are pretty decently accurate. Now, I don't know the exact chances, but these are just the one that Noelle provides. So, it is more likely that whenever you click a cat, it'll just summon another normal cat. However, there's also a chance it'll summon a cat with a blue aura. There's also a rarer chance that it'll summon a cat with a rock and roll fire kind of aura. And now, third and fourth ones are both just angels. I've seen both of these angels in gameplay, I believe, unless if I'm going crazy. I don't know which one's rarer than the other, but they both kind of just do the same thing. Now, intriguingly enough, there is now an extremely rare chance that instead of summoning a cat at all, it will instead summon this little face. Which, if you don't know, this is the face from Queen's Basement that you can see from like a split second. Now, clicking on it, instead grows very big, and then plays this little laugh sound effect before sending you back to the main SPAMTON Sweepstakes page. Now, that is something I will definitely be talking about later, but first, let's talk about these two angels, because whenever you click on them, it instead summons a window. Clicking on that window leads to deltarune.com/windows, which is just this whole row of windows. And the title for this page is Aren't You Forgetting Something? Which, if you don't know, is the same title for the weird, the fandoms called it the Ice Palace area in the original SPAMTON Sweepstakes. Now, clicking on these windows leads to the dog page, which is just the page that comes up if you search deltarune.com/ and then anything that isn't an actual website on the deltarune.com. However, the actual words in the website name could actually be unscrambled into Lost Where the Forest Would Grow, which was just this tree that whenever you clicked on it would play a, I guess, piano orchestral sting kind of sound. And the title for this page was Roots. Now, if you clicked on it enough, it would send you to deltarune.com/window, with a singular. And then, similar thing, the websites that you got sent to when you click on the doors could be unscrambled into deltarune.com/thepoorchildren. And the title for this page is Therapy, which is very interesting considering this page is just one big drawing board where you can just draw a bunch of squares. Now, after a while, you will realize that drawing in the middle will slowly actually start to be colored, and then once you finally draw it all out, turns out it's the tree that the Eggman sits behind in Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. Or I guess also just kind of the Chapter 1 tree in general. Anyway, clicking on this tree sends you back to deltarune.com/egg. Kind of sending it full circle there. But this, funnily enough, is the same page that you got sent to if you clicked above the tree in deltarune.com/man, which is the same tree that is in deltarune.com/thepoorchildren. Anyway, sorry. I feel like I talked extremely fast there. Sorry if I did. That is pretty much everything as of right now that I am aware of. There might be some other small things. Again, feel free to put it in the comments. But besides that, that's it. So, theory time. I'm going to be doing it in the same order that I talked about when I was doing the surmise. So, first off, this whole, deltarune.com/chapter 4 thank you thing. I don't really know what this all means, but chances are, with it being, a feminine person, I'm going to presume that it probably relates to Des or Noelle, as those are our two really main female leads in the whole SPAMTON Sweepstakes thing. That's what mainly it's really been all about. It could be about Susie, maybe, but, I guess the answer would be one chapter. But, yeah, really, we're just probably going to have to wait and see if there's more with the email thing, but my best guess is that it probably relates to Des or Noelle. Now, with the whole deltarune.com/chapter 1, 2, and 3, the whole applicable, not applicable, applicable, but, and the whole numbers thing, it's interesting that all the ones that are not applicable are all hidden on the website. And the number 1 is the smallest, and 2 or 3 are both the largest. They're equal in size, but 3 is still hidden. And then, specifically, the fact that 2 leads to a song that only plays during the weird route really makes me think that this is meant to be some kind of weird route calendar or roadmap. Now, I think it's easier to start with what we already know about the weird route. In Chapter 1, there is pretty much nothing to do with the weird route. You can't start it in Chapter 1. The only really difference is that if you use violence, then you can't talk to everybody after the fact, right? And then in Chapter 2, this is the main part of the weird route. Halfway through, you start the weird route, and it majorly changes the rest of the chapter, right? So, if we see on the website, the number 1 is small and hidden because it has nothing to do with the weird route, except for the fact that, canonically speaking, it happens before the weird route, right? But Chapter 2 is big and shown off, and that is because it is the starting point of the weird route and, changes the story event significantly. Again, this is majorly just speculation. So, with that, we can presume that the future numbers probably mean something to do with their significance in the weird route, which probably means that Chapter 3, which is big yet hidden, which, in my opinion, it either means that it changes significantly if you're on a weird route save, but you don't need to do anything specific to continue the weird route besides just completing the chapter, or it means that the story itself never gets changed, but you do have to do something to continue the weird route. Personally, I'm more in line with the first option. I think that's the most likely one, that the story itself is changed, but you don't really need to do anything. Now, Chapter 4 is small, yet shown, which I think means it just is a little bit of both, right? You need to do something, it's very small, but you still need to do it to continue the weird route, but you still, there are still small little changes. Now, I don't know why it says smaller than Chapter 1, it should say it's bigger than Chapter 1, because the number 4 is bigger than Chapter 1, so there is going to be more weird route stuff in Chapter 4 than in Chapter 1. And Chapter 5 is big, but it's still smaller than the number 2 and 3, which I think means, you're still going to have to do something. There's still going to be some major changes, but nothing as big as, killing Birdley, which is a whole other thing if Birdley's really dead, but I'm not really here to debate that right now, at least. I'll talk about that later. Anyway, now, I don't really know if it being titled Back is entirely important. Personally, I don't really know. And, H.MP3, which is the song that plays when you click on Chapter 5, it kind of sounds a little bit like the start of Hometown's theme, but I just might be crazy. And considering the fact that the song that plays when you click on Chapter 2 is only played in the weird route, it is also possible that this song will also be only played in the weird route. Now, touching on the 2 doors here, I don't really know what their website names would mean, /RAM/ROM. I know this was something that was also theorized back when the Green Room was first revealed. Now, as for what the doors are themselves, I've heard people say it kind of has the same style as the Town Hall, which I see, but I also don't, and I think it's just more likely that this is just somewhere new in the Light World that we haven't seen, because it looks very Light World-y, right? I think it is in the Light World. I think it's just somewhere where we haven't particularly been yet. Now, with the text, if only you had the, weird sound effect, your luck might have gone another way. No weird sound effect, no crystal. Obviously, the popular thing is that it probably has something to do with the Shadow Mantle. Because, Sham says, "Hey, you ain't got the Shadow Mantle. You're gonna die." Right? So, no mantle, no crystal. That seems like what it's gonna be. Considering the fact it is MA.MP3, it is possible that it's meant to be, mantle.MP3. However, thing I've seen someone bring up is that it could be referring to another crystal. Namely, Snowdrake's mom, funnily enough, is called Crystal. Snowdrake's mom is also dead in this universe. However, considering the fact that it is called M.MP3, it could be referring to Snowdrake's ma. I don't really have any other thoughts on this, other than it's interesting, but I think this might be just overthinking it, right? I don't know if Snowdrake, one of the 2 characters in the classroom that doesn't really seem to be all too important to the story, the second one being the monster kid, or I guess monster teen now, I guess he would be called. Either way, I don't think Snowdrake is all too important to the story, so, Snowdrake might be the knight, I don't know. But, personally speaking, I don't really think that's what this is. I think it's meant to be the Shadow Mantle. Now, this might be a bit crazy. Apparently, there's a Link's Awakening reference, mainly with that moving black cube that plays in between the if only you had the blank and the doors. Because, like I said, if you click on it, it says, you can't defeat us, let's rumble. Allegedly, like I said, I haven't been able to replicate it. But apparently that's a reference to the final boss of Link's Awakening, who says that exact same thing. Now, I'm not the biggest Legend of Zelda guy, so I might be extremely wrong here. However, from what I've researched about Link's Awakening, the whole thing is that it takes place inside a giant fish god's dream, and you have to fight the manifestation of that whale fish god's nightmares, and you have to defeat it, which will cause them to wake up, but it will effectively destroy the entire thing. And, you know, the whole, oh, it's actually a dream plot twist is mainly like, because, you know, it's not like oh, well, everything didn't really happen. It's that it did happen. It's just, you know, all the people that you talk to aren't real, and you're pretty much going to have to kill them all. Which, you know, it's sad. It's bittersweet. You know, I haven't played it. I also probably should have said I'm going to spoil the entirety of Link's Awakening before I spoil the entirety of Link's Awakening. Anyway, my guess from this is that Deathel, who is the final boss of the game, is kind of paralleling the player, or the knight, depending on your interpretation of them, which is just that they want to keep the game, aka the dream, going, instead of making everything right and giving everyone the peace that they deserve, right? Which, I think people theorize that that's going to be a main theme of Deltarune. Again, personally, that's just what I pick up from this. Anyway, onto the title of this page, No One Will Shed a Tear for Him. Now, this is masculine, so presumably it refers to a male. And I only really conjured up 3 possible candidates that this could be referring to. First being Rudy. Now, Rudy is probably going to die, let's be honest. But, I mean, there's a good chance someone will shed a tear for him, right? You know, he has 2 daughters, one of which is a lost girl. But I'm pretty sure Noelle would cry. I hope his wife would cry, you know. I know Asgore was good friends with him. He'd probably cry. You know, the closeness of their friendship is entirely on interpretation. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Anyway, so yeah. The second person I think of would be Birdly. In the weird route, he is kind of dead, or at least in a coma-like state-ish. He's frozen in a dark world, which kind of means he's just kind of brain dead in the real world, or just eternally asleep. So yeah, he's kind of dead. Unless you know, the people who think that the thing's gonna melt are true, which I think would be very intriguing. Anyway, the person who actually know that Birdly's kind of dead are Chris and Noelle, and Chris probably won't cry unless we let them, which is kind of dark, to be fair. And Noelle, considering the fact that this only happens in the weird route, is kind of out of it, per se, right now. So, there is a good chance that, you know, she won't cry because she's too busy trying to figure out what this weird voice in her head is, right? And then the third one I got that I don't really entirely believe in is SPAMTON, because in the normal route, he's kind of dead-ish? Not really, it depends. It depends in the normal route, because he just turns into an item, right? However, in the weird route, he is really, really dead. And the only people who actually know him, that have a relationship with him, are the Addisons, Mike, and presumably Tenna. Now, Tenna is, from what we can guess, is pretty antagonist towards SPAMTON, so he probably wouldn't shed a tear. The Addisons probably don't know that he's, you know, punctured with multiple ice spears, or whatever happened to him. you know, and they also kind of disassociate with him. And even in the normal route, they might cry. We don't really know because we don't see their faces once we see them after the fight with SPAMTON Neo. And then Mike is always just kind of an unknown entity, so who really knows? At the end of the day, I don't really have any concrete guesses for this guy, but these are my main ones. Also, it is important to say that no one will, it being past tense, not past tense, sorry, future tense, implying that in the future, no one will be shedding a tear for him or whoever it is. Anyway, on to these little cat buckaroos, namely the final one, the face in Queen's Mansion. Yeah, I think the fact that he is here, or sorry, they are here with all these other little cats implies that they are probably cats. Now, I'm going to be referring to this face as friend, as everyone else in the fandom does. Now, it's actually been a pretty, somewhat popular theory that it could be a cat, mainly having a parallel with the Cheshire Cat, from Alice in Wonderland, I believe. You know, as you can see there's this one frame where he makes a very similar face. And I'm pretty sure there's been some other stuff, like the cat ads in Chapter 2, and the whole cat minigame having the same colors as his eyes, you know. And also, this is probably the same face from Deltarune.com/chair, as they both come out randomly, do a little laugh sound effect, and then send you back to the sweepstakes page. Now, a lot of people presume that this face is Mike. Now, I can't really say if it is Mike. However, I think it's more likely that this is Mike than it is that this is Tenna, considering the fact that Tenna only existed once you created the Chapter 3 Dark World, while you can see this face in the Chapter 2 Dark World. Anyway, now on the topic of the window, or windows, depends on what you get. I instantly notice a parallel with the windows here to the church windows, which I also notice a parallel from the church windows to the windows shown in the trailer. Now again, I presumed that this would be in Chapter 4, so I presume that this window sprite is probably going to be in Chapter 4, further cementing my belief that Chapter 4 takes place in the church. Now, as for the title being the same as the Ice Palace one, I don't entirely have any idea what that can mean. Maybe the Ice Palace is going to be in Chapter 4, but I don't really know. Anyway, on to the funky little tree thing. The URL for this being Lost Where the Forest Would Grow instantly makes me think of, well, Lost Girl. Therefore, making me think about, you know, Des, Noelle, all that. Now, the forest, I guess, it makes me think of the bunker, because that's in the middle of the forest, and probably the deepest we can get in the forest. So maybe it's that Des is lost where the forest would grow, which is near the bunker, which, again, that is another thing that people have been theorizing for a long time. Now, if you notice, you can actually see that the tree here has the same texture as the Jockington Grows the Beard image that we saw on the Steam page. Now, that makes me very intrigued, because considering the fact that Jockington is a snake, and that he has the same texture as the tree, and that Chapter 4 is probably going to be in the church, and, you know, have religious aspects, is Jockington the devil? Obviously, if you don't get the joke there, it seems to be heavily paralleling with the sin of original sin, that being Eve gets tricked by a snake who is the devil to eat an apple from the tree of God, which then in turn makes her sinful, although she does make Adam also eat that same apple, also making him sinful as well, for they have both disobeyed God. So we are missing an Adam and an Eve and an apple. However, we can presume that the apple here is probably Chris, due to the fact that, you know, you have the whole story that on Noelle's blog post about how Susie was bullying Chris for having apple shampoo, and as so you can see here in game, she mentions how their hair always smelled like apples. So Chris is probably the apple, and I guess we can presume that Susie and Rouse are meant to be Adam and Eve, because, you know, boy, girl, maybe. Honestly, I don't entirely know what any of this would mean, but really it's just food for thought to think about in the future chapters. You know, maybe Jockington is actually the knight, and also the devil. Now, on to Deltarune.com/the poor children. Obviously, it's very important to notice that that's plural. And from the fact that the title is therapy and it leads to the egg tree, my thought here is either whoever these poor children are went to therapy that somehow involves the Eggman. Maybe the Eggman's the therapist. Or someone or some people had to go to therapy because of the poor children. And, you know, I've heard people say that maybe it's referring to the fact that maybe Asgore and Toriel had to go to therapy because of their children being rather poor mentally. You know, Asriel was presumably good friends with Des, so, you know, Des going missing would probably hurt him emotionally a lot. And, well, Chris, you know, they have a little friend inside me, so, you know, they obviously are probably acting very different. Then again, we don't really know how or when they got us inside of them. Ugh. But, you know, their children aren't doing the best mentally, so, and obviously they are, you know, presumably about to divorce if they're taking couples therapy. So, you know. Anyway, in conclusion, I still think Chapter 4 is going to be a bit more serious than Chapter 3. That doesn't mean Chapter 3 isn't going to be serious at all. I think it's just going to be more serious, I guess. It seems like the weird route will be more prevalent in Chapter 3 than in Chapter 4, but Chapter 4, you're going to have to do more to continue the weird route than you would have to do in Chapter 3. It would seem that the Shadow Mantle is actually quite important. I always, you know, when I first heard the line, I always kind of just took it as a bit that Sean was doing, but maybe it actually is important. Link's awakening might parallel with the story, maybe. Friend is a cat, Jockington is the devil, and therapy. Yeah. Anyway, as I always like to do at the end of my videos, to try and throw some weird little curveball at the end, or just neat little... I like to add something after the conclusion. And in it, I actually have something very interesting, that being that this screenshot from the Steam page, if you brighten it up, you can actually see that the background is unaligned, meaning that the image was edited for some reason. Now, we don't really... I don't have any theories. Maybe this attack pattern is actually for a different enemy, rather than these church bell looking fellas. Or they just spliced it because maybe they looked weird. I don't know. But anyway, that's all I got for this video. I hope y'all enjoy it. I am very excited for Deltarune Chapter 3 and 4. I will probably stream them. I might not, because I don't really want spoilers, and it comes out an hour earlier in Australia. But it also comes out on June 4th for me instead of 5th, 11 p.m. So, not p.m., sorry, a.m. But yeah, other than that, I'll see y'all then. I don't know if I'll make another theory video, because there's probably not going to be too much in between now and the release, because we have less than a month. Whoopee. But, yeah, other than that, I'll see y'all later. Ka-chow.